Hey everybody, this is Sean Riley with Riley Real Estate and MassHomesale.com with this week's Q&A Saturday video. This week I'm going to be answering the question of, can I sell my house with a failed septic system? So in Massachusetts, about 1/3 of the properties are still served by septic, so this is not a small consideration for many people. So the basic answer to the question is yes, you can. It's complicated, and more complicated than that, but that is the quick and dirty answer. So in Massachusetts, as probably people who have septic systems know, we have regulations known as Title V, named after the law, that requires these inspections, where at property transfer, a system needs to be inspected and eventually needs to pass the Title V report. So it does not say that it has to pass at the time of transfer, but there are guidelines around when it can be, how long it's going to take for somebody to repair it. So that's why it is actually possible to sell it if it is failed. So there are a couple basic options. So the first one, the most common one, is the seller fixes it. So this is the easiest for everybody, the least hassle, the least problems, but obviously it's the most difficult and expensive for the seller. And if you don't have money to do it, this is going to be a problem. And it can be pretty expensive, so it can be difficult to get done. The second option is, if the buyer's bank allows it, sometimes you can escrow the cost of replacing the system, and basically the buyers will do it after closing. To be honest, most banks aren't doing that these days, and when they do it, usually the idea is you have to escrow 150% of what the bids are. So if if the estimated cost is $30,000, then $45,000 would have to go into escrow. Now this is a problem if the proceeds from the sale are less than that, because you can't do it. Also, like I said, most banks aren't really doing that, and there is an issue where there might be ways to work around this, but generally you can't get a contractor estimate on the replacement until you have approved designs from an engineer, and that in and of itself could cost a couple $1,000s. So either you need to pay for that up front, or the buyer has to agree to do it. Buyers are generally hesitant to do that, because if they don't end up buying the property, then they've spent a couple $1,000s on all of this engineering and permitting and stuff like that they aren't going to be able to get back. So can be a good option for people, but it's very difficult to do, and honestly, a lot of times it's just not going to happen. And the third basic option is to sell with somebody who's not getting a bank loan, because that's where the problem comes in there. The bank requires there to be a working system. They're not going to finance a property that has a failed septic, or, like I said, a plan like that in order to get it fixed immediately. Excuse me. So the last option is to basically sell it to somebody who's using cash, or a private lender that doesn't require that to be fixed immediately. It doesn't have to be an investor, but that's typically going to be an investor, especially with a failed septic system. So, for example, somebody like us who buys and fixes up properties to keep and to sell, we would buy a place that has a failed septic with cash or with a private lender, and then basically you don't have to worry about it anymore. We'll go through the process of getting the engineering, getting the thing replaced, and then getting all the sign-offs and stuff. So if we're keeping the place, that we're in compliance, and if we're going to eventually resell it, the buyer knows that they have a new system that's in compliance. If you are going to try to fix it yourself, as I alluded to, it's pretty expensive. In Massachusetts, so if you're watching in some other part of the country, your costs are going to be totally different. Things are very expensive around here, but typically you're going to spend from like $15,000 to $50,000. You're really going to spend less than $15,000 around here. This is for a replacement. Now, if you just have to do certain repairs, like if you get a conditional pass where there's just a few problems, you could obviously spend significantly less than that, depending on what the issues are. But for a full replacement, it's going to be tough to be under $15,000, especially when you factor in the engineering and permitting and all that stuff. You can actually go well over $50,000 if there's problems, like if you need to have a raised system, or if your land is too small to be able to fit it on there, or if you're too close to groundwater, if there's ledge or any host of other problems and stuff. It can jack the cost up very quickly, and you could be into six figures without any problem. Now, generally, you're not going to go too much over the 50 grand unless there is a couple of major problems. But like I said, it's even on the low end, it's pretty expensive. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's not a fast process. So if you can get everything done in 2 months, that's pretty good. You should really expect it to be like 3 or 4 months. Now that's from getting the report, and then getting your permits and your engineering design and getting those approved by the city, and then actually installing it, and then getting re-inspections, and then getting your certificates of compliance from the Board of Health and all that stuff. So the entire process. If 3 or 4 months is pretty realistic, it can certainly take longer than that. And that's assuming it's at a time of year when it's easy to do. It's very difficult to do this over the winter, because if the ground's frozen, or if this past year you had 10 feet of snow on the ground, you're not going to be able to replace the septic system. So you generally need to get that done in the spring and summer, into the fall. But there's definitely a few months of the year where it's just really not realistic to be able to do the perk tests and dig up the ground and do all the stuff you need to do in order to fully replace the system. So that is some of the basics. I think that's everything. Yeah. Some of the basics of how to handle a septic system, the process of getting one fixed and getting it approved, and the options for selling a house if you have a failed system. So if you have any questions about this, as always, just leave them below. And if you have just questions in general that you'd like me to do a video about, leave a comment or put it on our Facebook page or our Twitter account, or send an email to info@masshomesale.com. And till next week, have a good week, and I will see you then. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.